Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. I hope you're all staying warm and safe wherever you are. It's about 35 degrees here in Florence. We have about 5 inches of snow still on the ground. Haven't been able to be in the library building in a week, so we're going to do this remotely today. Thank you for joining us on another event for our Black History Month this month. This year's theme is about families. And so we're very happy to be joined by Tom McKnight, who has done lots of good research on his family history and has uncovered quite a few interesting facts and things that he's going to share with us. So I hope you enjoy Tom's discussion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Colby. First of all, I'd like to thank the Florence Public Library for selecting me to be the presenter for Black History Month. Though the theme is family, okay, this is also a story that goes beyond immediate and extended family, because it's also the story about the human family, and that we all have more in common than we realize. But first, a couple of administrative and housekeeping matters to share with you. If you look at your screen, you will see that you have the libraries or Florence Public Library's Facebook archive link. Now, for those who are following this program by way of Zoom, at the conclusion or on Monday, then this presentation will be up on the Facebook archives. For those who don't have access to Zoom, then you can still watch the program if you go to the Facebook archive location or link. So I just wanted to share that with you. You'll note during the PowerPoint presentation that there will be some media links, newspaper links, and YouTube links embedded in the PowerPoint slide itself. Now, you won't be able to activate those. However, once the program is finished and is all uploaded on Facebook archives, then you'll be able to watch it as many times as you like, number one. And number two, in terms of actually gaining access to the links themselves, if you will just take down this, note this Gmail address, is tmmedicinewheel@gmail.com. That is TM for Tom McKnight, medicinewheel@gmail.com. And then I can send you those links, which actually covers all of the newspaper coverage that was done here in Northwest Alabama, as well as some YouTube videos. So with that having been said, despite being snowed in, iced in, had a broken pipe last night, and just a little while ago, the propane decided that they wanted to give up in the tank. I should say that the show must go on. So, hey, Murphy, we'll pull the curtain, please. Murphy's Law. He's a member of the family, Murphy's Law family. Well, thank you for joining this presentation on Chasing Ghosts and Rattling Bones, a cold case search for lost ancestors. There's the chasing ghosts. There's the rattling boats. Ooh, bones. American Indians and most indigenous people have an understanding of the universe and how things work and that we're all connected. And that expression is that we live in a universe and a world that are circular and all things end in a circle. You listen to your elders, they might have said something like, what goes around comes around. Well, and that is very, very true. On earth, as it is in heaven. This is something that, while I've been on this journey, this roadway of life, that I've learned that is concerned.
Okay, bye-bye.
Nothing is by coincidence for those that believe and who are faithful. A couple of scripture verses which kind of gives you the encouragement when you think that that there's no way forward. And Joshua 1:3 says, "Every place that the sole of your foot shall tread upon, I have given to you, just as I promised to Moses." And a couple of verses of Psalms 37:23-4. "The steps of a man are established by the Lord when he delights in his way. Though he fall, he shall not be cast headlong, for the Lord upholds his hand." And I can tell you that when I started this journey, I didn't know anything about genealogy research, and this has been what I refer to as a divine intervention-led mission and journey. Before we get into the program, I'm going to share something with you. It's known as the Great Medicine Wheel Circle of Life, something that is well known and understood and practiced and believed by most indigenous cultures. Okay, and for me, the quest is how do you attain 360-degree peripheral and spiritual vision, and then faced with the challenge of looking at your quadrant boundaries of our lives and seeing how we can grow. Now, without even the graphics here, imagine a circle, but we're going to help you along with the magic of PowerPoint. And you divide that circle horizontally by half. Divide it further vertically by half. And you'll see that you have 4 quadrants of 90 degrees each, representing the great medicine wheel of life, 360 degrees of our journey. Now, when the Lord created the heavens and the earth, he created the 4 directions: north, east, south, and west. He created the 4 seasons. And he created the 4 nations: white, black, red, and yellow. These are the nations of his creation, represented by this symbol. He also created a 4-letter word, L-O-V-E. And his commandment is that we love him, our neighbor, and ourselves. So the 360-degree peripheral and spiritual vision challenge, or vision quest, is to examine just where we fit in each one of these quadrants. And the challenge is to go outside and grow outside of our little 90-degree comfort zones to explore what the others have to offer. It's like going into the edge of a forest and not going in. If you don't go in, then you miss out on the symbiotic relationships of all things working in harmony. And it's all driven by one 4-letter word, love, held together by the axle for whatever name that you have for God. Look at the same model here. If you look at the contributions that have been made in defense of this nation from a military perspective, beginning with the E at the lower quadrant, had it not been for the Tuskegee Airmen and their contributions, we would be living in a completely different world. And so, total of nearly 1,600 total missions, 15,533 combat sorties, 112 German airplanes destroyed in the air, 150 German aircraft destroyed on the ground, etc., etc. Over 1,000 air medals and 150 distinguished flying crosses. Well, for a people who basically had been set aside in terms of society, not a bad outcome as an experiment. We move over to the V quadrant. Had it not been for the American Indians and the code talkers are known as the wind talkers, who, though the system had basically tried to stamp out their culture, heritage, language, traditions, religion, and ways of living, had they not retained their language, which was used in combat to thwart the Germans and the Japanese, because they couldn't break the codes, they didn't know the Native American languages, then this too would have, this world also would have been a completely different place. And so we're talking about roughly about 15 tribes as far back as World War I, including World War II, whose language helped us to deliver or achieve our freedom. And had it not been for their contributions, we may not have had an Iwo Jima in which to plant the colors. Move up to the O quadrant, and you have the all Japanese American 442nd 100th U.S. Army Regimental Combat Team, basically given impossible targets while their families were contained in internment camps. The most highly decorated U.S. military, U.S. Army unit ever to exist. Thousands of medals, 9,485 Purple Hearts, 560 Silver Stars, et cetera, et cetera. You can read the details on your Facebook page. And if we move over to the L quadrant, today's 21st century military and global challenges requiring engagement of all races, ethnicities, creeds, religions, and gender remind us that our nation's diversity is our nation's strength. And so we must, let us unite as individuals, family, community, and nation to serve who? One nation, under who? Under God. A little background on myself, born and raised in New York. Served in the Air Force for 4 years, served in 2 commands, United States Air Force Security Service, and with communications, intelligence, security, electronics, intelligence, and so on. The second command, Strategic Air Command, deal with cruise B-52 bombers and KC-135 tankers. If you look at these pictures below, this was a much younger Tom McKnight without the arthritis. Wish for those days sometimes. I've also spent more than half of my life with the United Nations. Served in more than 20 countries, comprising drought, famine, civil war, civil conflict, classified as complex emergencies. These are just some of the scenes or some of those locations with the responsibility in some form or fashion to provide the needs for those less fortunate than ourselves. Food, shelter, water sanitation, health, education, nutrition, agriculture, protection, gender issues, livelihoods creation, security, conflict mitigation, and of course, logistics, air, sea, road, and rail, as well as the communications, and in order to get what is necessary delivered to those in serious and dire need. As we watch this Zoom program, somewhere in the world, there are those who witnessed this morning's sunrise without any guarantee that they will see this evening's sunset, much less tomorrow's next sunrise. We're so blessed in this country. Let's look at this model on a more global perspective. And you'll find, whether it be Europe, Asia, Africa, Middle East, etc., that you have people who are in need and who have been blessed enough to be part of a organization to hopefully help someone realize more than a couple of sunrises and sunsets. These are some of the freeze frame moments of some of those environments. Misery doesn't discriminate. Need does not discriminate. Bombed out villages, homes destroyed, people on the run. This was taken in the mountains between southeastern Turkey and northern Iraq when the Kurds were run out of northern Iraq and basically barely managed to survive. But I was blessed to have been there and to have been part of helping them to see another day and hopefully have a decent life. These are some more shots from northern Iraq, southeastern Turkey mountain range. There are 8 of them all together. And those mounds that you see in those pictures, those were the daily graves that were mounting throughout that mountain range. Denuded environment. Also was involved in C-130 air food drops, coordinating those from the ground, get food to the needy, the necessary. South Sudan. But it was also an opportunity as since I worn many hats, as an EPI officer, expanded program of immunization project officer working in rebel-controlled territory in South Sudan, and to seize an opportunity to beat swords into plowshares. Working with various commanders. This is the commander of commanders on the Nile River East Bank, Commander Coleman Yang, actually administering oral polio vaccine to the 0 to 5 underage children. Target population. So move from pulling triggers to dropping OPV, and that's one way of kind of moving in a positive direction. Gulf War I, or after Gulf War I, back up in the mountain ranges between the southeastern Turkey and northern Iraq, liaised with the Allied forces. Here you see these guys, and these are U.S. military loading up syringes so we can inoculate the children as protection from contracting measles, because measles and malnutrition is an instant killer, and we wanted to get them inoculated prior to their repatriation back into northern Iraq. And these are some of the guys that I had filling ice packs. The posse, again, up in the mountains. And then here's this little one here on the right-hand side of the screen, actually being inoculated. 5 years ago, found myself back in Sudan as a consultant, World Food Program, Kobo on the Ethiopian border, running our programs up there. And so that kind of gives you a background of service to humanity. But now we want to get into the heart of the program. We have a belief system that the ancestors will tap someone on the shoulder to make sure that their stories are told. And so therefore, the ancestors were the tappers, and I think I became the tappee. But you'll find that your course, whatever you had planned in your life, takes a dramatic shift from what you thought you would be doing. Tragedy and loss comes when it's least expected and least wanted. So that you sometimes onto unwanted pathways. And of course, that tragic event occurred when Mom passed away while I was in Sudan in 2004. I was in the Darfur's area. She had been dead almost 2 weeks, and it took almost a global APB to find me, to get the word to me. And one of the State Department contacts finally connected with me, and I learned that Mom had passed away. Strangely enough, I woke up 2 weeks prior to that, feeling the lowest that I had ever felt in my life, and I didn't know why. But then after I got the message, then I was able to piece the two together, because the spirit is not just bound, okay, to a neighborhood or a continent. The spirit will find you, and the mother's spirit will find you wherever you are, and she did. First 3 months of bereavement leave after leaving Sudan to Yonkers, New York, to settle up her matters, was followed by a question of, well, who are we? Who am I? Because the elders never spoke much about the family history, because they were of the belief system that children should be seen and not heard. And that that has long-term detrimental impact in terms of sense of identity. But there are a number of reasons why they probably withheld those things. And the thing is that when the elders got together, and they're the ones that I think are probably the originators of social distancing by generation. When elders got together and the kids were around, they just cut your eyes at you. Didn't have to say a word. They just cut your eyes at you, and you knew what you needed to do. You needed to disappear, go outside and play, because y'all don't need to hear this. And in some degree, they may have been right. And if you decided that you're going to stick around anyway and hang, well, then you got the invitation that didn't feel too good. You got the invitation to bring in a switch, and that's how they rolled, as they say. So thus began the search and hunt of ancestors, culminating in finding my grandmother's unmarked grave, Hattie, Missouri, Watkins, Snyder, and many other members of those alive and those long gone. Didn't know that my origins originally was from Tuscumbia. In fact, I didn't even know where Tuscumbia was. Well, now I know. So armed with a couple of stories, one physical address and a GPS. And when that technology hit the market in 2005, this is when I came back to the States after settling up Mom's affairs, to undergo this journey to see how best I could piece the family tree together in Mom's memory. Yeah, that GPS ran me $999.99 plus tax. But without that, I'd still be stuck somewhere in somebody's woods trying to get out. But this has also been driven, as far as I'm concerned, that outside of the single address, GPS, a couple of family stories, this mission, this journey has been divine intervention driven. And constantly reminded that I had to behold the only thing greater than myself, because the Lord made ways where there were no ways. And as you genealogists know, that you can go only so far. You hit a brick wall, and you say, what, and sometimes it ends there. But God is good all the time. He made ways where there were none. And mind you, I started out as a novice. Didn't know anything about research and genealogy and what connected, or even how to do it, except by hitting the road. So during my 3-month stay in New York to settle Mom's affairs, and learning that my grandmother, who had hitchhiked to New York with her 3 children when her family died, to get them to a place of safety because she knew that she was going to die, somehow she ended up back in Ohio, and I set out the journey to try to find her and to find out where she was buried. And so this was a shuttle exercise for 3 months back and forth to try to find out where she was buried. And so could not have done this without friends and kindred spirits and divine intervention, and just great people just coming out of the blue, making little contributions. Gloria Winston Alice Orang got me off the off the diving board, so to speak, because she was already from here and had done a lot of research, and we connected while I was in Sudan by internet. Chris Osborne, head of the Franklin County Archives, Massillon Cemetery staff in Ohio, Gene Atkins, a librarian in Ohio, Mrs. Odessa Bailey, and so many, many more. But according to the cemetery records in Massillon, Ohio, well, actually, let me back up. Because actually the library records in Massillon, Ohio, stated that my grandmother's headstone, or my grandmother's burial, was burial number 2023. And so I spent some time trying to find her. Anyway, moving along, the shuttles between New York and Ohio resulted in picking up records. And of course, the library staff had issues with the cemetery because of the poor keeping of records, etc. So they were missing maps of loss of records during the Depression era. Their handwritten burial grounds map to the left here. No markers, burials every 2.5 feet, and I'd be pacing steps as the best estimate. And there was the Knoll versus Potter's Field. And so what were the odds that I would find my the unmarked grave or of my grandmother? But we did know that her burial plot was 2023. However, in the review of the records, there was an H. Snyder thinking that it was Hattie, Missouri Snyder, my grandmother, citing a burial location of 2397. So that was a bit, a bit of a confusion there. So here's some of the documentation that was collected on the first trip to the United States during bereavement leave, trying to prepare myself and for what was to come. Couldn't tell where she was buried, so I put a little flower arrangement on a spot. Didn't know if it was 2397 or 2023, and left it there, waiting for my return to the United States the following year in 2005. But I ordered her headstone under the other number, just in case. So yes, ordered her in the headstone, returned to UN duty in Sudan with the intention of coming back in 2005 to devote a couple of years to do the best that I could to try to piece together the family tree in Mom's memory. Now, it wasn't until I was about to leave for that return trip to the Sudan from New York that the librarian said, "Oh, hold on, that H. Snyder is not your grandmother. That's an H. Snyder, but it is a Henry Snyder." And that was that 2397 number. And so on the return trip, I was shuttling between sections of the cemetery, trying to piece things together, and whether or not she was buried in Potter's Field on the grassy knoll or wherever was unknown. So that's the return trip from Sudan back to New York, then finally down to Alabama in 2005, and that began the journey of 14,496 driven miles in 86 days, trying to find family that I never knew existed or met before. And I decided that once I settled down in Russellville, that I would take the scenic view. And my basic strategy was to focus on the periphery, try to find the core members of family members, and then settle back into Russellville, into Alabama, where you would basically have a pretty static population, and maybe there would be someone who could fill in the blanks. So my focus was on immediate family members, oral history, okay, and then drove across the nation, okay, periphery first, find folks, and then come back to Alabama. I generally didn't spend more than about 3 days maximum per location, visiting health centers, checking out newspapers, funeral homes, cemeteries, going to libraries, reading obituaries, trying to find them wherever I could, talking to neighbors, knocking on doors, going to churches, referrals, and a whole lot of praying. Oh, yes. But when I got back here in 2005 to continue the journey, I went back to, my first objective was to go back to Massillon, Ohio, to continue the search for grandmother Hattie, Missouri, Watkins, Snyder. And as you can see here from this map, okay, that journey that took me to other places.
Were you lying to the jury then?
Hello? Okay. Took me to other places. And these are a couple of the staff here at Massillon Cemetery who were extremely helpful. Now, when I decided to head north after settling in Russellville to pick up where I'd left off and trying to find the unmarked grave of my grandmother, and then though I tried to stay in contact across the seas before returning home, there was no new news about her exact location. But I was armed with all of the information I needed, spacing of graves and the knoll versus the potter's field, et cetera, et cetera. So I drove up to, this is on a Friday, drove up to Massillon, Ohio, trying to get up there to the cemetery before they closed, but I wasn't successful, so I went to Lowe's and stocked up on all of my supplies. I bought rake and shovel and stakes and twine with the intention of trying to find grandmother's unmarked grave. And of course, since I knew that every burial was about 2.5 feet, apart, I hammered in my where there were some markers, hammered in my stakes and ran my twine, and I had my own little CSI operation going on there in the back of the cemetery. Yeah, checked into the hotel and following morning, Saturday morning, I was down in the back of the cemetery trying to see what I could find. There's another shot every 2.5 feet. Well, it wasn't until almost the end of the day, mosquito bitten, dehydrated, hungry, I went over to the edge of that ground right there, and just below on the other side, you see all those trees is Potter's Field, and I'd been down there the previous year, and I laid my hand up on this tree, and I happened to look down and just happened to see this little bit of just a piece of concrete just sticking up out of the ground. I said, well, what's this? Why is this way over here at the edge when all the burials are just up the hill? So I got all excited, set it off, and exposed it, and then I found out that I recognized that number of 2024 that was over in section 6, while 2025 was in section 4, and realized that these were a couple of twin boys that were born 45 minutes of each other, and both had passed away, but yet they weren't buried together because they were funeralized by two different companies, or two different funeral services. So here I found one of the baby Finleys, and then I looked up at the hill, and then looked at my notes from the previous year and tried to figure it out, and my goodness, I realized that I had found, based on the sequencing, I had found grandmother's unmarked grave. Now, they would not have wasted an adult-sized grave on that burial line, okay, by putting an infant in there. So that's why that infant was buried there pretty much on the bluff. So I was quite excited. Now, in our Native American belief system, we kind of look at clues, and as it turned out, if you notice that tree had one long, lone strand or branch with the leaves on it, and at the time, didn't realize until I got back here that that was actually pointing directly over grandmother's unmarked grave. And of course, the headstone that I had ordered the previous year was laid by one of the ground staff, and every time he was, working to adjust it, and he'd stand up and hit him in the head, and he reached up to break it. I said, no, I said, don't do that. I said, you see where that leaf is, that branch is pointing? And he looked at me and he looked at the leaf. He says, hey, you're right. Oh, man. Well, this is the librarian that was so helpful. And when we found grandmother's grave and honored her with a headstone, she called the pastor friend of that she knew, and we had a prayer service right there. Blessed is the spot, and I conveyed that to one of the elder cousins I found way out in Arizona. So that's grandmother Hattie Missouri Watkins Snyder, honored with a headstone. Born in Tuscumbia, and of course, most of the family, majority of the family, sought greener pastures when opportunities provided themselves, and moved to the Midwest and points beyond. So she moved out of Tuscumbia and found her husband and had children. My mom, Aunt Cheney, and my uncle, who's still alive. Mom is gone, and Cheney, I'm still searching for. So after 68 years, grandmother Hattie Missouri Watkins Snyder got her headstone. And because anyone who has served on this planet should not be laid to rest as if they were never here. Without a headstone, that's a dishonor. Well, the journey continued on to Akron, Ohio, where I started finding cousins and scouring neighborhoods, et cetera, one thing led to another. But God is good all the time. He makes ways when you think ways don't exist. And then, as I said, that having spent no more than 3 days in each location, looking at newspapers and finding out when funerals took place and who was living where, and I'd go to those various addresses, and in some cases, there had been family members who had not been in that location for 20 years, 30 years. But they ended up back in those neighborhoods, and it was a blessing. And this is really the crux. This is the key right here to what really set me on the path, because my cousin Victor had shared with me a document which I call the squiggly wiggly papers, because this was information that was passed down, and you better be ready to write when Aunt Ella Victoria Watkins Thomas was ready to talk, because again, those elders didn't really say a whole lot. But man, I tell you, this squiggly wiggly paper had a little star in one location and a line somewhere else, but just about everything on that document, as this became my roadmap, pretty much turned out to be right on target. Now, academia has a tendency to want to discount the accuracy and the importance of oral histories. Yeah, you got to check every little box, okay, to say, yeah, you were here, because you got to be documented. But you have to remember that you had a system that did not regard people as human beings. And so therefore, there's not going to be a record on you. Okay, and this is why it's so difficult to trace African American genealogy and Native American genealogy. Okay, it wasn't part of the plan, wasn't part of the system. But I can tell you that the importance of oral history is very, very valid, and maybe sometimes even more so than the documentation, because the victor gets to write the story. And that's what you have to unravel. And this is a fact. And so this document, and here's the bottom line point here of the credibility of oral histories. You can rest assured that people who have been directly impacted by physical pain, mental pain, emotional pain, psychic pain, spiritual pain, and have the physical scars to go along with it, they're not going to be embellishing too much, because that experience is indelibly recorded. And it creates a biochemical reaction that I believe, as cellular memory, gets passed down from one generation to another. So yes, oral history is important. So this document was really the roadmap. And of course, as I continued my journey across the United States, trying to find folks, the three generations of Reverend Fred Watkins. There's Reverend Frederick W. Watkins, who was a Cherokee Indian, great-great-grandfather, born in Tennessee, somewhere in Tennessee, in 1811, and hid out from Trail of Tears capture. But as in Native American understanding of things and directions, and the direction of west represents the direction of death. So you got some choice to make, either to be banished to the Western lands or fall into the slave system, some choice. And hence, this is how some of the Watkins fell into the slave system. So Cherokee Fred, followed by Reverend Fred Lafayette W. Watkins, great-grandfather, and then there was Uncle Fred Watkins III. And he lived to be 105 years and found that family as well by some God-driven intervention things that just, as you genealogists will know, when you hit a road block and all of a sudden, just kind of something pops up where you least expect it. That led me to Arizona, where after finding Lyda Denise Johnson's brother in Indiana, who was living right on the corner of a few houses down the block from where I had last information of where she lived. That was decades earlier. Well, someone came along and who was walking their dog on behalf of their kids, and I asked them if they knew anyone by these names, and they said no, but asked this guy on the corner. And so I went down the corner. As it turned out that this was a cousin that I had never met before. He got on the phone and called cousin Lyda out in Arizona, and I was lickety split in my my Cherokee Jeep, you know, as my cousin says, yeah, the black Cherokee and the black Cherokee Jeep. Yeah, I headed that GPS to Arizona. Met her and her husband, Walter Johnson, and she remembered my grandmother with her 3 children hitchhiking to New York before she died during the Depression. And remember seeing my mom, uncle, and aunt as my grandmother moved through, because she did not want to leave her children and burden her sister, okay, with these kids. So her goal was to get them to New York and to at least get them to a place of safety where they might have a life. So this is a picture that just surfaced from a cousin of mine, Captain Samuel Snyder III, showing a very, very rare picture of the whole Thomas family. Now, this is when I found out that my great-grandmother was the cook at Ivy Green when Helen Keller was a child. His cousin Snyder told me, he says, you know, your great-grandmother's a cook. I says, what? I called my uncle and elder uncle and said, hey, uncle, guess what? Did you know great-grandmother was a cook? He says, yeah. I said, well, how come nobody told me? He says, because nobody asked. But this was important stuff, man. Born 20 July 1854 in Cortland, Alabama. Died 14 August 1917 in Tuscumbia. Member of church and fraternal affiliations, organizations. First Baptist Church in Tuscumbia. Member of the Mosaic Templars of America, or the MTA. And that was the 888 Celeste Mullins chapter of Tuscumbia. And she was the cook. That's that house behind in the back of Ivy Green is where she cooked on the left-hand side. And the way it's fixed up now, where she slept on the right-hand side. And that's her headstone over in Oakwood Cemetery. Didn't know that. The beauty of research, the beauty of asking. Finally made it back to Alabama after exploring the periphery. And Chris Osborne, who's the founder and chair of Franklin County Archives in Russellville, Alabama. Well, when I was on bereavement leave and the contact that had been established between her and myself through my other cousin, she and her daughter Buffy had gone down to Oakwood Cemetery to, armed with some basic information to try to find my great-grandmother's headstone. And so she and Buffy had spent a whole lot of time searching, walking all over Tuscumbia Oakwood Cemetery. And she says, and as she tells it, she says, Miss Sophie, says, me and Buffy are tired out here, so you're going to just have to show yourself. And she's happened to turn around and came across great-grandmother's headstone. And of course, she let me know about that. And Chris was also responsible for me to zero in on my great-grandfather, Reverend Fred Lafayette W. Watkins, because when we first talked while on bereavement leave, she looked up the information in her, film, and said, your great-grandfather was a very important man. I said, how so, Chris? He said, well, he when he died, there was at least a half a dozen preachers who who presided over his funeral. He says, wow. So others who have helped me is Colonel Arthur D. Graves, who I consider a master historian, because my first day in Tuscumbia, he took me. I knocked on, went down to going down to the funeral home, and to inquire if any of these family names, if anyone knew anything, and someone directed me down to Colonel Graves' house, and he looked at me, and then I told him, who I was, what I was doing, and so he says, "Come on." And we got in this car, and he took me on the tour, drove me all through Oakwood Cemetery, explaining who was whom, and gave me a mobile history lesson, and then took me around to introducing me to a number of families, which kind of set me on the pathway. This is a great-granddad, Reverend Fred Lafayette W. Watkins. Of course, yes, he was a very important person. And the beauty of research is to find the documents that actually places them and that puts them on the pathway. But this is the American Star, where that funeral was covered. And so born in December 25th, 1853, died 1911. He preached his last sermon, as I learned, out at Bethel Lauderdale Missionary Baptist Church, where he was assigned in the 1901. And up to that point, was known to be a quarter-town preacher. But he preached his last sermon about a week before, said he wasn't feeling very well, and never returned. And of course, he's as pastor, he either was pastor or delivered sermons at Bethel Lauderdale MB, where he pastored for about 10 years. Calvary Missionary Baptist in Sheffield, St. Paul in down here in off Cook Lane, Mount Zion MB Church in Barton, and First Baptist in Tuscumbia, where he preached numerous sermons. Presided over during his funeral by Reverend Dr. L.J. Green, F. Frank Brawley, William Carter, S.L. Vincent, J.B. Butler, R.H. Haynes. I mean, these were the powerhouse Baptist preachers back in the day. Well, first trip here to Alabama during bereavement leave, cousins took me around here and there, and we went over to St. Paul Missionary Baptist Church, and we looked at the marquee. There was a reference here to a Fred Watkins and also to a Thomas Donnelly. And I said, well, let me make note of that until I return to continue the journey. Well, when I did return here, going back out to St. Paul MB Church, spoke with the Reverend Keaton Stewart, and he said, well, didn't know much about some of what I was asking about, but hold on. He said, let me call the one of the deacons here. And so he called Walter Frank Brown, and when Walter Frank got on, he says, here, why don't you talk to him? He gave me the phone, and I told him who I was. And Walter says, what? He says, can you? He said, look, he says, yeah, we're related. He says, can you give me 5 minutes to get up to the church? And of course, it's just right down the road from it. I said, I'll give you 8. By the time I got out of the church, he was already there with his pickup, jumped out of the cab with his Bible, and he showed me who Thomas Donnelly was related to, and who they were related to. And of course, great granddad's name was there, as great granddad's name was there, as well as Delia Donnelly, who I didn't even who was a Watkins, so I didn't even know existed. So family Bible, again, these were the help to put the pieces together. So that was important information. In consequence, we got together and collaborated on a couple of projects to make sure that great granddad's picture ended up on the wall, and actually put these other pastors up, which are still up there today. Also learned that Delia Watkins Donnelly, born 1853, was a seamstress at Belmont Plantation, married Reverend Tom Donnelly. Of course, her father was Reverend Frederick W. Watkins, the Cherokee Indian, or who I refer to as Cherokee Fred. And mother was Mariah, maiden name unknown, born somewhere in Virginia. But the brothers were the second generation Reverend Fred Watkins, Seton Watkins, Rush, Spencer, Peter, and Giles. And interestingly enough, they all have middle initials of W, which I think is Willis, but I'm not 100% sure. Of course, there's Reverend Tom. That's their kids. Lillian Donnelly on the far left, Polly, Porter, Annie, and then there's Milton in Virginia, and Ed was struck by lightning. Here's another showing some of the yet to be found spouses and added to the organogram. Now you look at that. You look at that face, Lily Donnelly. Now the Watkins were known for not taking a whole lot of guff. They come back, they come through a very, very tough background. They were tough people. If you put together great granddad Reverend Fred Lafayette W. Watkins and Lily Donnelly, and that's a generation skipped. Well, first of all, you definitely see the serious Native American features there. And when they looked at you, that was it. They didn't have to say anything. If they had to talk, then you knew that was on the opposite end of a shotgun. One of the most important documents in this location is known as the American Star. And Reverend B.J. Bonner, a few years ago, had discovered some copies that were not part of the of what is known or what is available in the library, even the Library of Congress. And so we digitized those documents. But this was the very important newspaper edited by Professor George Washington Trenholm. okay, who was a very important man in this community. And this newspaper was actually the community talking drum in print. So you want to know what was going on? You got the American Star. And Professor George Washington Trenholm didn't play. If you weren't doing what you're supposed to be doing out there, man, you got told on big time on in that paper. Everybody knew. But it's a very, very important newspaper for the African community. This newspaper also revealed the existence of a brother to my great-grandmother, Sophia Napier Watkins, okay, the Helen Keller cook, and which set me up to another long drive to Louisiana to find Barney and Harriet Napier's unmarked graves as well. But then again, the beauty of newspapers. So this is the family tree of great-granddad Fred Watkins II, or Fred W. Lafayette Watkins II, and Sophia Napier Watkins, the cook. And if you look down at the bottom, about 13 children, but actually there were 18, and I didn't find out about the existence of the other 5 until a few years ago after visiting Lida, who passed away just a month or so ago. And so I was blessed to have found that family when I did, because it helps us to pass the torch of who we are to further future generations. But great-grandmother and great-granddad, 18 children in all, 13 of which are kind of recorded, but then I wondered why it was so difficult to find the other few that comprise those empty boxes, only to find out that at some point in time, great-grandmother and Reverend Fred had moved to Louisiana, and she told my great-granddad, she says, look, we got to go back to Alabama. Why? Because I'm losing all of my babies to what? To swamp fever, which would have been malaria today. So that kind of explains the reason why those boxes are blank. But at least we know that their names. There's great-grandmother, there's the organogram, and she was well known in the community because she's written up in the American Star. Preacher's wife, well respected. She was somebody. In one of her articles to the Star, she says, "Dear editor," this is 15 May 1901, "allow me to say that the American Star is a great light to all who read it. If the good Lord will let me live, I'll never be without it. If our people would only read more, they would be greater. I pray God to give the editor great success." Of course, the editor was Dr. Trenholm. Now, this is her picture, and I just thank all the cousins who provided through that marathon drive these little bits and pieces that can be shared to everyone, or with everyone. Also cite here they make them, okay, we think it's not true. It's actually Mariah Watkins, okay, which was Helen Keller's playmate. And Mariah Watkins was actually the daughter of Uncle Rush Watkins, which does not make her daughter, but actually her niece. And so the importance of research and bringing the truth to bear. I mentioned earlier that great-grandmother was a member of the Mosaic Templars of America. And this was a African-American fraternal organization that was formed because Black people could not get the same services or access to services as others. And so therefore, this fraternal organization provided insurance burial fund. They provided a whole lot of other services, and that for a monthly subscription, when you died, then you would be given a headstone and some cash, endowment. Now, Viney Murphy and great-grandmother worked together at the Keller residence. Viney Murphy was the nursemaid to Phillips Brooks and Mildred. And so she eventually became one of the lead officers of the Mosaic Templars of America, the MTA, the chapter that great-grandmother was a member of. So when great-grandfather died in 1911 and great-grandmother died in 1917, and then with the great mystery for me was, where was great-granddad buried? Okay, because he wasn't buried in any of the other church cemeteries that he pastored, and that was my mission, to try to find him and to make sure that he was honored with a headstone. That Mosaic Templars of America headstone was kind of unique in its own way, because as you see on the lower right-hand side, it had the MTA with 3 V's at the 6 o'clock quadrant, which meant Veni, Vidi, Vici. I came, I saw, I conquered. And the actual symbolism, with which you can't see, with a snake around the outside, basically this, and with crossed staff in between, represents Moses leading his people out of bondage. And no one knew about the existence of this organization, even those who were born and raised down here and whose parents and grandparents and great-grandparents were members, because it only takes 2 generations before history is lost, if it isn't passed on. But Viney as well was a highly respected member of the community, okay, teaming up with great-grandmother to lead praise services and youth programs, et cetera, et cetera. So if we look at the overall scheme of the Watkins organogram, beginning with first and generation, et cetera, the research and work still continues. Rasha Watkins was one of great-granddad's brothers. And of course, it took me a little bit of time to make certain connections, and that's still an ongoing process. But here's a question for those who may know something, and that is to know if anyone has any information of Bertha B. Watkins, the wife of Rush Watkins, who then, when she died, he remarried a Rose Bonner. So if you have any informations that you can share, then you'll have my tmmedicinewheel@gmail.com Gmail account to to help bridge some of these gaps. And so the rattling bones continues. Now, there's also a query with regard to, for those who may know, of who the Ella W. Thornton is and those origins, because the last will and testament gave bequeathed some land to Bertha B. for thanking her for her service. So there was a Dr. Gustavus B. Thornton and Ella W. Thornton's last will and testament that gave Bertha some land and a house. And so any information that anyone can provide on that would be greatly appreciated. And of course, past cousin who's passed on has passed on this information, which goes back to, I guess, the early 1900s, and it helps to make the connection of the Watkins family. This is the lady, Ella, Aunt Ella, Victoria Watkins Thomas. She made sure that you knew who you were, okay? And she used to always say, from what I've heard from oral history, that you have royal blue blood running through your veins, that you are somebody, okay? Didn't know what that meant until got onto the journey and discovered, yeah, we are somebody. Langston Hughes is also part of the the somebody list. But Aunt Ella on the left-hand side, so when she was a younger in her teens, and this is the distinguished-looking lady over to your right-hand side. And look how close she resembles my great-grandmother, Hattie Missouri Watkins Snyder, who was also known as Aunt Doll. Well, who were some of these people, famous people? Well, there was James Carroll Napier, Nashville, Tennessee, got a law degree at 1872, Howard University, successful law practice in Nashville, Tennessee, president of the National Negro Business League, civil rights activist, politician, founder of the 1 cent bank still in existence today under a different name, of course. And there was the U.S. Treasury Registrar during the William Howard Taft administration. And his name is there on the 1911 to 1913 certificates issued by the government. Then we have a Tuskegee Airman in the family, Lieutenant Carroll Napier Langston. This is class picture with his parents. Yes, the message continues. You are somebody, we are somebody, we are all somebody. And his story, which you can read on the Facebook page, is that 7 June 1944, he was returning from a mission that was launched out of Ramatelli, Italy. He developed engine problems, was given the order to permission to bail out into the Adriatic Sea. His wingman saw him successfully parachute down, but he did have trouble inflating his rubber dinghy. And it wasn't until basically 2 weeks later, 26th of June, that he was found on shore, washed up on shore by U.S. Army Ground Patrol. And so they wrapped him in a blanket, buried him in a shallow grave, erected a cross, hung his dog tags on there, and that was it. And of course, it took me a decade, pretty much a decade, to try to determine whether or not his remains had been repatriated back to the United States. Still thinking that he was still buried some 100 or 300 yards off the coast of Italy, just south of the railroad tracks. Well, all of that research paid off, because found out that eventually 4.5 years later, after his demise in 44, that he was laid to rest at, and this was, he was exhumed, reburied, then exhumed again and buried in the National Cemetery honoring war heroes or soldiers in Italy, and his parents fought hard to get his remains home. So he is buried in Nashville, Tennessee, in the American Legion Post 31 Color Guard, of which I'm a member. We drove up there and gave him full military honors. Folded flag in front of his stone, 21 gun salute, playing a taps, and make sure that he got the honor that, given the attitudes and practices of the day, that he would have never received. And there's a spiritual component that happened with that, with regard to the Indian thing, okay, of looking for, nature signs and clues of approval. But let me just, that's another story. But let me just suffice to say that the wind was blowing in all directions, north to east, east to west, north, south, south, north. And that was kind of confirmation as the messenger that the ancestors were happy. Now, you can gain access to the video as well as the print media links, as I mentioned earlier, by sending me your request by email, and I'll make sure you'll get something that you just click on and go directly to the internet. But here's some pictures taken after his ceremony, and as you can see on the left-hand side, lo and behold, what happened? Man, there's Mama and Papa, and Lieutenant Langston decided that they're going to join the color guard in this photo op. There they are again. That's my daughter, Christina, who drove from Pensacola to attend that presentation. So We got Reverend Fred Watkins. We got the family there. A little bit of history coming almost full circle. And then here's the information of the ceremony honoring my great-grandfather, Reverend Fred Lafayette W. Watkins. And as I mentioned, I spent nearly almost a decade trying to find out where he was buried. But here's the connection. Bonnie Murphy became head officer of the Mosaic Templars of America. Great-granddad died first. Great-grandmother died second. Great-grandmother and Bonnie Murphy were close buddies, workmates, fellowship together. So when great-grandmother dies, where's she going to bury her? I'll bury her next to her husband. She would have known. Of course, Bonnie Murphy died in 1919. And Chris Osborne and I and Buffy had actually gone down to these burial sites and used the coat hanger technique to determine whether or not there were any burials there. And according to the coat hanger techniques, well, there was a male buried to the right of great-grandmother's headstone. At least she had one. He may have had one, but there was a big place on the, not on the tree, that at some point in time might have fallen down and broken it. And of course, then everything was lost. But anyway, so this is after 109 years, this was a mission that had to be fulfilled to make sure that he had his headstone. And we had quite a great turnout, and you'll be able to see all of that and read about it on the information product that I'll send you by email. This lady right here with the mask, this is one of the matriarchs. She's about 95, 96 years old. Cousin Louise Heiler, okay, and her mother was in that brown picture back there in 1908. And so there's great-grandmother and great-grandfather united again after 109 years. So he's been honored with his headstone. More information to read, the history, and of course, he was known as Little Angel. And so, well, and there's the story behind that. So when I came down here to try to piece the family tree together, and thanks to Mrs. Odessa Bailey, who I stayed in contact with while I was overseas, that's where I found out that great-granddad had pastored out of Bethel Lauderdale Missionary Baptist Church. And so a couple of friends of mine, Reverend Bonner and I believe and a couple of other people, had taken me to see this Deacon Judge. And when he saw me, and this guy was in his 90s, dapper Deacon, he was an amazing guy. He says, he looked at me, and when he learned who I was, who I was, he said, well, he says in his gravel voice, he says, well, your great-granddaddy, he was a mighty fine preacher. When he preached, the rabbits came out of the woods. He says, you know, that there's a whole lot of gambling going on in the bush. But when Reverend Fred showed up, the gamblers dropped their dice. And then as I was about to leave, Deacon Judge Smith said, they called your great-granddaddy Little Angel. And I said, why is that, Deacon Judge? Because he looked like an angel when he was in this casket. Now, this would have been information that had been passed down by the elders of the church that he attended. So here's a couple of shots of the actual coverage of the headstone laying ceremony. It's my daughter there. And so, journey of 14,496 miles in 86 days, and all the people that I came into contact to, all part of the full circle thing, or as they would say, full circle thing, results in a confirmation that we do live in a universe and a world that are circular, and everything does exist in a circle. This journey has also been interesting from another standpoint of the family, because I got to find the family of the biological dad that I never met. And that was about 9, 10 years ago. And so on the left-hand side, that's Papa Wesley. And at the top of his hat is grandmother Lean Whitaker Lynch. And of course, that's my mom on the right. And so interesting how things come full circle. And I was blessed enough to find that family and find out who who I am, and so discovered my brother, who didn't find out until who his biological dad until he was what, I think 65. I didn't find out until I was 55, but we had a chance to reunite, and there we are. So it's been a blessing. Now, talk about the human race family, the human family. It's all driven by this model. And here, as we pretty much come close to the wrap up here, had the opportunity to honor Lieutenant Frankie Lee Wallace as part of a Highway for a Hero celebration dedication, of which I was chosen to coordinate that. And Lieutenant Wallace had given his life during Vietnam to make sure that the people that were under fire that he saved were made it to safety. But unfortunately, he didn't. But we celebrated his service to this nation. And here's where, again, we talk about family. Well, we're all part of the human family, and we are our brothers as well as our sisters' keeper. Here's the information on that you can check on through the email address. And then had the great pleasure and honor to oversee and plan the ceremony. And this is about almost a decade after Lieutenant Darrell A. Russell, who was a friend and a mentor to me when I came to Alabama, whose grave had not been honored with a headstone, to organize a program whereby he too received his full military honors, flag fold, 21 gun salute, and the playing of taps. And there's the information on him, and where he was under fire, was taken as a prisoner of war, and until the Russians liberated those camps, and they returned him and some of his men, the ones that survived, back to American lines. So why is it important, okay, for us to know our ancestors' past? Because a people which takes no pride in noble achievements of remote ancestors are not likely to achieve anything worthy to be remembered with pride by remote descendants. And so I guess I kind of was sent on this pathway to be able to bring this, as well as other family stories and histories, together. So y'all, we're just about coming to the end here. So y'all give yourself a hand clap. And I say thank you. And I'm going to turn this over to Colby in just 2 seconds, which you can send your information and questions to tmmedicinewheel@gmail.com. And I thank you so much for allowing me to share this moment with you, to share the family history. And despite snowing in and snowed and frozen in and all the other things, it turned out to be really a beautiful day. So thank you very, very much. And Colby, it's back over to you.
All right. Thank you very much. That was a wonderful presentation. It's such a fascinating journey that you've taken to get here with your trip through your family history. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. Everyone who's here, make sure you jot down his email address if you think you might have some questions for him in the future. Also, this will be posted on Facebook. The Digital Archives Facebook page will post it on Monday, probably mid-morning on Monday. And so if you want to click through his, watch through the presentation again and see, follow any of the links that he posted there, that'll be your chance to do so. But again, thank you very much, Tom. We really enjoyed having you. It was such a really great presentation. And
Well,
everyone out there, thank you for coming. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to come see us and come hang out with us today. And I hope you're all staying warm and safe wherever you are, and that everyone has a good rest of your day and a good weekend. Thank you.
Thank you much. Take care. Bye-bye.